What's going on, everybody? Draken here, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a very special and awesome deck tech plan for you guys. As you can see by the table, we are going to be deep diving into my Edgar Markov deck. This is a deck that has taken a lot of my time, a lot of my money, and a lot of my play testing over the last several months. But I figured a combination of the time that I've put into it, with Dragonstorm being on the horizon and Innistrad being released, or Innistrad Remastered being released, I don't know, about 6-ish weeks ago. This is a little bit older news in terms of Edgar being kind of a focal point of reprints and things like that. But again, Innistrad a few weeks ago, or about a month and a half ago, Dragonstorm on the horizon for April. I really felt like it was the perfect time to kind of showcase this deck. As April comes around, most of my time, my playtesting, my brewing, my money is going to be poured into my Dragon deck. So I figured, let's get this deck tech out there prior to Dragonstorm, before Innistrad Remastered becomes super old news. I feel like spoiler season is all year round now. So again, I thought it would be a good time to showcase this deck. Again, it's taken a lot of my time, a lot of my playtesting. I will say there are some card choices in here that I'll go over that I'm kind of on the fence on. There is some room to kind of like min-max some of the choices as more playtesting comes to fruition, but we'll review those card choices and those kind of points where you can go along. But before we get started, if you guys want to support me, support my endeavor, and to continue making videos on YouTube in the way that I like to, please use the affiliate links below. Number one, we have the TCG Player One. If you want to purchase any trading card game product of any trading card game on that website, use that link, bookmark the link. Doesn't cost you any extra money, and a portion of your purchase kind of funnels back into the channel, so that's super appreciated. But if you like some premium TCG accessories with an anime aesthetic, head on over to duelingguard.com, shop for deck boxes, shop for binders, shop for your own trading card game sling bag, and use code Draken for a discount. They just started shipping these awesome Gohan deck boxes. I believe they call these the Beast series. There's also a Broly one as well, but they have Dragon Ball Z, they have Berserk, they have One Piece, they have Yu Yu Hakusho, like you name it. They have products for it, and they're awesome. These deck boxes are fantastic. Again, this is what they call, I believe they call it the Beast, for like Gohan's Beast form, but these are great. Head on over to duelingguard.com, buy a deck box, buy a bag. They also have, if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, they're doing a pre-order for like a Dark Magician Girl, Blue Eyes White Dragon lineup, which is really cool. So head on over, use code Draken for a little discount. Much appreciated. Be sure to connect with me on Discord. You can message me. You could join the Draken server. We could talk Magic. We can talk really anything. But as Tarkir Dragonstorm spoilers come along, you can see the Discord server kind of rumble a little bit more. So head on over. Shoot me a friend request. Shoot me a message. Always appreciated. And if you want to support me directly, head on over to Buy Me a Coffee. Send me a little tip. You don't have to if you don't want to. Don't feel obligated, but it's just kind of a way to directly support me. I've been asked in the past, how can I directly support you? Much appreciated. Big shout out to my boy WillUp88 for the super chat through YouTube. You're the best, man. I appreciate you. We'll get your Dragon deck on the channel as soon as I have some extra time. But with all that out of the way, let's get started on the deck tech. All right, so before we get into the meat of the deck, let's talk some primer, let's talk some deck philosophy, and we'll talk some strategy before we get into things, as well as power levels. So the idea of the deck is to use a lot of the 1-drop vampires and even a lot of the 2-drop vampires to kind of facilitate our cantrippy engine. Then we want to utilize these cheap vampires and these free vampires early in the game to manifest some sort of card value, whether that's increasing our mana by sacrificing or tapping one of them, whether that's sacrificing one of the weenie free vampires for some card draw. But we want to use those to gain advantage and get some tempo and to really accelerate our gameplay. Then we want to use the abundance of vampires that we'll have late game to close things out via combat or a combo strategy. Now, I will say this deck is packed with tutors. This deck is packed with game changers. It is a very strong, very tuned and focused deck. Again, how I said before, there is some min-maxing we could do in some of the card choices and optimization, but it's very, very close to the strongest that I think I can make it. So with that said, we are falling into the bracket 4 category. So we're not CEDH, we're not metagaming, we're not playing for that, but we do have tons of tutors and tons of game changers, and that kind of funnels us into bracket 4. So now that we kind of have the deck's power level and strategy out of the way, let's deep dive into Edgar himself and figure out how we're going to utilize him for our strategy. So if you guys know me, you know I love Judge Foils, and I had to get the Edgar Markov Judge Foil here. So Edgar is a Mardu vampire. He costs 6. He has Eminence, so if he's in the command zone or on the battlefield, whenever you cast a vampire, you make a vampire. That's what this whole deck is based around. We want to trigger that as many times during the game as we can. He also has First Strike and Haste, and whenever he attacks, you may put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So the idea here is to not really cast Edgar until we are late enough in the game and kind of use him to make a big push or close things out. I'm kind of keeping track on how often I cast Edgar. It's not very much to figure out like which free spells I want to include, but we'll get into that as things kind of manifest here. So yeah, that's Edgar, that's the vision, that's the deck so far. All right, I wanted to start with the RAM package here because it's very clean, it's very streamlined, it's very trimmed down. So kind of, again, we talked about earlier, we're very, very heavy into the 1-drop, 2-drop strategy, really heavy into the 1-drop strategy. So the curve of the deck is very, very low. I think we're at like a 2.5 without lands, which is very, very low in terms of the grand scheme of things. So we want enough ramp to get there, but we don't want to be flooded with a ton of ramp. So that's why I opted for a very thin package. Often this deck can perform and cast its spells regularly with, 4 or 5 mana early game, and even if you top out at 6, 7 mana, you could double and triple spell and still get there. So we didn't want to flood ourselves with ramp. So kind of going into things, the first of many vampires or 1-drop vampires you'll see, Master of Dark Rites. It's 1 black for a 1/1. Sack another creature, add triple black, use it to only cast really vampire spells in this deck. So you'll see a lot of these 1-drop vampires. Some are more relevant than others. It just so happens that Master of Dark Rites fits the bill with a lot. It can ramp us. It's a 1/1 vampire, and it just gets us there. Some of the cool lines of play with this card is obviously like turn 1, cast it. Turn 2, play a land, sack your 1/1, add 3 black, and play like a 4 or 5-drop vampire early on in the game to kind of just help you set up, increase tempo, get you there. So it just fits. It ramps you. It's a 1/1 vampire, one of the better ones in slot. So I really like it. So we have the obligatory Soul Ring. I'm playing this art version. It's not a real card. It's the actual art card, but this is from Commander Masters. It looked really, really awesome, and I figured Soul Rings are everywhere, so nobody would be upset if I played the signed art card. Next, we have a really cool card in this deck. I love this card a lot. It's Springleaf Drum. It's 1 colorless, and then you tap this and tap any untapped creature you control to add a mana of any color. So you can kind of see the interaction. It's like, play a vampire, make a 1/1, tap that 1/1 immediately for a mana of any color to kind of just keep your plays going and snowball a little bit. It basically turns all of your vampires into Birds of Paradise, or any vampire of your choice essentially into Birds of Paradise, which is really good, especially in a deck that doesn't have green. It's a nice little addition to the deck. Soul Ring and Springleaf both cost 1 colorless mana, so they are both tutorable by Urza Saga, which is really nice. So you could use Urza Saga to get your Soul Ring. If you already have your Soul Ring, get your Springleaf and continue to ramp from there. Going into some more mana rocks, we are doing Talisman of Indulgence. This is the black-red talisman. Talisman of Hierarchy is the black-white. And then we do Arcane Signet. So Arcane Signet is self-explanatory, 2 mana rock. It adds any color that we need. The only reason I'm playing these 2 talismans is because our primary color is black, so we always want to have black. And then these obviously are 2 subcolors. I like talismans better than I do signets, just because they can tap for mana on their own. They can tap immediately. And then, we do have like a drain sub strategy, so the life is irrelevant. And then the last mana spell, obviously, Smothering Tithe. On the Game Changers list, one of the best cards in the gift format. 4 mana. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they have to pay 2. If not, you make a treasure. So very small, very clean ramp package. It just helps us get there. And then on top of having an abundance of tutors in the deck, we can always get to the ramp spells we want. All right, so let's talk about the deck's card draw. This is a category I did want to spend a little bit of time on, talk about the card choices, and really stress the importance of having a good card draw package, really in any deck, but most importantly this deck. When you're playing a lot of low mana value creatures, it's easy to burn through your hand within the first several turns of the game, and then obviously like a well-timed board wipe sends you back to the Stone Age, and it's really hard to recover, right? So in the deck, I wanted to have a very, very strong, consistent draw package that not only lets me draw cards early in the game to hit my land drops, to play my vampires, but I also wanted some sustainable card draw late game that allowed me to keep my hand replenished in case of a board wipe, but also allowed me to draw some of the pieces to maybe a combo or some of my game enders in order to just close out the game and win before anybody at the table can respond. So as in all of my kindred and creature type decks, you'll know that if it's a card draw, ramp, removal, anything of that nature, if it is on the creature type of the deck that I'm building, it always has a ton of weight, right? So we do have some vampire card draw spells. So let's just get into some of them. We have this really cool gold gas guzzler here. This is 1 black, 2/1, which is really, really cool. It has start your engines, and then it has this creature enters tapped, which usually early in the game it doesn't matter. It's just to kind of make that 1/1 vampire. And then when you have max speed, you can sacrifice another creature or vehicle to draw a card. So this is essentially, you're going to play this early game. It's going to help you do the vampire things. And then once you're at max speed, you're able to cash out for a free card. It is just a 1/1 vampire for 1. So it has a relevant ability. So we're going to play it, right? We have Falconwrath Pit Fighter. This is 1 red for a 2/1. You can discard a card and pay 1 red and 1 to sacrifice a vampire to draw 2 cards if an opponent has lost life this turn. So surface level, again, it's a 1 mana vampire, which creates a vampire, so it creates the fodder to sacrifice. And then kind of when you're ready, you can cash in a vampire to draw some cards, right? So if you remember kind of from the first slide, it's really we want to sacrifice and cash in on our vampire tokens early game to gain some advantage, and then use them later in the game, create additional ones to close out. So again, these are just 1 mana vampires that kind of draw cards, and again, they're just kind of some of the better ones in slot. We have Welcoming Vampire here. This is 3 mana flyer, and whenever 1 or more creatures with power 2 or less enter the battlefield, you draw a card. It triggers 1 each turn, right? So essentially, almost any of the creatures that you play come tagged with a 1/1, so you get to draw a card, right? So it's just cantripping all your vampires. You have Welcoming Vampire, you play a vampire, you draw a card, you make a 1/1, right? So it just kind of keeps that engine going. It's a vampire, fits the theme, really, really good in this deck. This is a newer one. This is High Society Hunter. This is 2 black and 3 flyer. Whenever this creature attacks, you may sacrifice another creature, and if you do, you put a 1/1 counter on it. So it's fine. It sacrifices a guy, makes a 1/1, and whenever a non-token creature dies, you draw a card. So by attacking with this, it allows you to draw a card, but really, when a creature on the board dies, you draw a card. It could be your own creature through High Society Hunter's effect or an external effect. It can be a removal spell played by one of your opponents on one of your opponents, which is really cool. It could be your own removal spell. Like we're playing Flare of Malice in here. So you have this, you cast Flare of Malice, and you remove 3 creatures and you can draw 3 cards. Seems pretty good to me. This one is a little higher on the curve at 5, but I feel like the effect is just so good, it warrants a spot. Same thing goes for Champion of Dusk. This is black, black, and 3. Whenever this card enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the vampires you control. So the way this triggers and you stacks is you cast it, it makes a vampire, so it counts the token that you're actually making while casting this, right? So at the worst, it's a 5 mana draw 2, lose 2, which is not good, but that's the floor, right? If you have 4 other vampires out, cast this, now you draw 6, lose 6 for 5 mana on a vampire body. Very, very good. So this is a tight 5-card vampire draw package. Moving on here, we have Esper Sentinel. Everybody loves Esper Sentinel. One of the only creatures in the deck that isn't a vampire, but if we're in Mardu colors, like, we have to play this. 1 white for a 1/1. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell, you draw a card, unless they play X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Just an overall stunner card for the format, stunner card in white. And I figured, even though it's not a vampire, like, it's still worth a slot. One of the best cards in the deck is Skull Clamp. So Skull Clamp has 1 mana, 1 to equip. Equip creature gets +1/-1, and when it dies, you draw 2 cards, right? So you can probably understand and see the synergies. You have a lot of 1/1 vampires. Anytime you cast one, it makes a 1/1, obviously, so that you could just clamp your tokens for free value. And that's what we really want to do, is we want to use our tokens early game, sacrifice them to draw some cards, clamp our 1/1s early in the game to draw some cards. In addition, it is a 1 mana value card, so it's tutorable in that Urza Saga package, which is really nice. And this is one of the cards you like to see early game, because you could just pour some mana into it, hit your land drops, draw some cards. Very, very nice. Next, we have essentially 2 of the same cards here. So this is actually Village Rites. This is the Japanese alt art, and this is Corrupted Conviction. They are both black. You must sacrifice a creature in addition to other costs, which is irrelevant because all of our creatures make a free 1/1, and you draw 2 cards, right? So the reason why I like cards like Village Rites, Corrupted Conviction, early draw card spells like this, is because it ensures that our deck's engine is running efficiently. So not only are we casting low mana vampires, we're translating those into actual tangible cards. We're translating those into hitting our land drops, and we're translating those into other game changers and more powerful cards. So anything, right, these low mana value draw spells, even if we could trigger these early in the game, or even an early welcoming vampire, that's where we want to be, because again, it's going to ensure we can get our engine online, we can keep our hand full, we could hit our land drops, which, like, again, the first five mana of this deck is the most important. Once you hit like 5, you're pretty stable, you're good to go. So that's kind of the vision with those. Stinging Study. This is 1 black and 4. Draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the commander's mana value. So this is a 5 mana instant speed. Draw 6, lose 6. The reason why we're playing it is it's really good instant speed. Obviously, it's going to draw 6 cards, but I like Stinging Study in a deck like this because you could have a clear board, right? You could be freshly board wiped. You can have no other cards in hand. As long as you have 5 mana, you're going to draw 6 cards. And that's really hard to replace. It's really hard to find an ability that can turn me from 0 cards into 6 cards at any given time. So I felt like Stinging Study warranted a spot. Going into kind of some of the more powerful cards, and these are cards that you'll play a little bit later in the game, but these keep the engine going. Again, these are those late game cards that are going to draw you tons of cards either instantly or over the course of time. So obviously we're going to start with the big bad guy here, the One Ring. You're going to see this card in a lot of my deck techs coming up. It's going to be in my Ur-Dragon deck. It's going to be in a lot of different deck techs coming up because it's just that strong. So 4 mana, it's indestructible. When One Ring enters the battlefield, you gain protection from everything. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life, and you put a burning counter on the One Ring. Tap it to put a burning counter on it, and you draw a card for each burning counter on it. So basically, it's just going to draw you a ton of cards. The protection value is nice, right, to give yourself and your board pro everything, but it's just going to draw you cards. It's going to draw you 1 card, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, and at that point, the game's basically over. So One Ring, just a game, quote unquote game changer, but just a strong card overall. Next, we have one of my favorite cards of the year, Trouble in Pairs. I feel like this card was slept on a little bit just because when you read the first line of text, you're like, you kind of just write it off because it's there. it's really just kind of a bonus and gravy, but it's white, white, and 2. If an opponent would begin an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead. Whenever an opponent attacks with 2 or more creatures, draws their second card, or casts their second spell, you draw a card. This has been kind of dubbed the white Rhystic Study, but it just ensures you're going to draw cards. It slows the game down a little bit. It makes the table think before they start casting additional spells or attacking you with something. But overall, just a really good card to facilitate some overall, static draw ability across the board for you, turn over turn over turn. And again, right, we're going to, if we open up, 2 lands and two or three 1-mana vampires and a card draw spell or 2, we're cooking. But we are going to burn through our first, 7 cards very quick. So we want to be able to replenish them. And then the last card here is Bolas's Citadel. So it's triple black and 3. You look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands or cast spells. And you may pay life to cast those spells. And then you can sacrifice 10 non-land permanents for each opponent to lose 10 life. That does happen. You can do that. But this is just to kind of combo out. We have a low mana value. We're not playing a ton of lands. A little disclaimer, we're playing 33. So when you resolve Bolas's Citadel, you're going to be able to chain cards together. You're going to pay, 10, 12 life and have played like 6 cards, right? And each of those cards, hopefully they're a vampire, and hopefully they create a 1/1, or hopefully you can flip a spell to cash in and win the game, right? So Bolas's Citadel, just an overall slam dunk in just getting the deck to be able to triple spell, quadruple spell without actually having to play the cards in your hand. So this is the card draw package that I went with. Very strong, very tuned. Obviously, we have some game changers here. We have our early, 1-2 mana draw to kind of keep us fueled up at every stage of the game. Again, next to the vampires, the most important part of the deck. All right, we're going to go into the removal package next. This is a category that I had a lot of fun with because I've been toying around with some different kinds of removal. As you can see by the table, there's some cards here that may seem a little out of place. Maybe you haven't seen before at all just because of the card pool being so large. But I'm having a lot of fun with this removal package. It's a little bit smaller than I would like, but I'm a firm believer with a deck like this, the best form of removal is player removal, but you do need some, instant speed interaction to be able to kind of compete at, the bracket for tables. So let's go into some of the sorcery speed interaction in form of vampires, just because that's easiest to talk about. So we have Captivating Vampire here, and I didn't really count him as a removal spell when I first built the deck, and then just like the more I play it, like it's just easy to get 5 vampires online, and it is kind of like a removal spell, right? So then you could just kind of hold up your vampires until you're ready to take something or something poses a threat, and then if nothing comes along, you just end step before your turn, tap 5, just grab something for the sake of grabbing it and untap. So it's black 1. Other vampires get +1/+1, and then you could tap 5 vampires you control to gain control of target creature, and it's also a vampire. So I love this card. This card is awesome. It's obnoxious. There's a lot of psychology and game dynamic that goes into a card like this. So I really, really enjoy Captivating Vampire. I will point out, I believe it is the first Lord in this deck that gives creatures +1/+1. If you haven't seen any, that's kind of on purpose because I'm not playing a ton. I think I'm only playing like 4 cards in the deck that actual Lord +1/+1. And that's just because I didn't want too many to drop early game to conflict with something like Skull Clamp. So in a deck like this, you just will see less Lords. Just kind of a side note about Captivating Vampire, but definitely the strongest removal spell in the deck in terms of a creature, and just creates an awesome dynamic in the game. And then this is one of those cards I'm kind of on the fence about. This is Patron of the Vein. It's black 4 flyer 4/4. When it comes to the board, destroy target creature an opponent controls. So it's 6 mana sorcery speed removal, which isn't the greatest. And then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control, and you exile that, right? So, and that's kind of the reason why I'm playing this. It does a lot. Like, there's a lot of text on it. So yes, it is 6 mana sorcerer speed removal, but it also buffs my board, and it also removes everything, or it removes things from there on out from the game. So it just has a lot of text, and it is something I'm trying out. It's been okay. I mean, it hasn't been awful. It's never been bad. It's I will say the remove from gain, like the exile effect, is here nor there, just because at 6 mana, you know, usually there's stuff in the graveyard already. But I like that it bumps my board. I like that I could pinpoint and remove something. This could come in, this could come out. I was thinking about cutting this for like an Oathsworn Vampire, which is a 2 mana vampire that says whenever if you gained life this turn, I believe, you could cast it from your graveyard, and then throwing in like a Phyrexian Altar and making some sort of loop with that. That was kind of what else I was entertaining with this slot. But I think Patron of the Vein does have a spot. Again, you know, more testing will tell. And then we are in Mardu colors, which means we don't have access to counter magic. Or do we? Reprieve is a card that I'm having a ton of fun with. It is 1 white and 1, return target spell to its owner's hand, and then you draw a card. So if you're kind of in a bind, opponent wants to go play a really big swingy spell to end the game, maybe they tap 7 mana for a Cyclonic Rift or something. Not only can you counter it and return it to their hand so that it has to be cast again at a later time, it does replace itself and you draw a card. So Reprieve is something I've been playing in a lot of my white decks that don't have blue. And it's been pretty good to the point where I'm kind of just trying it out here and there in a lot of different decks. You could play any removal spell you like over it if you just think Reprieve is awful. But again, I'm trying this in my Eggshell deck. Very good. And again, because you don't expect counter magic from colors like this, it's nice to catch people off guard. And in the same vein as Tybalt's Trickery, you know, you counter target spell, you choose a number, they mill it, and then they flip till they get something of that choice. So, I mean, you're not using these cards just to counter the next spell that comes up. You're using these to protect your plays. You're using it to protect your board. You're using this to prevent your opponent from winning the game. So the down back of them having to cast it again, or the downside of them getting something else off the top of their deck, you're kind of choosing the lesser of the two evils, right? You're kind of just, odds are whatever I'm countering is better than the alternative, right? So those are kind of the vampires, the counter magic, so to speak, in the deck. And then we'll get into like some of the actual onboard pinpoint removal spells. And again, I'm trying something a little bit newer with this deck, and it's been performing very, very well with some of these card choices. So obviously, Swords to Plowshares, 1 mana, exile creature from the game. The controller gets life equal to the power. This really cool, I believe this is the Bloomborough art. I just thought this was cool, and I picked up this artwork for it, and I figured this was a good deck for it. So all these next 3 cards are in the same vein. So I am really, really high on this 3-for-1 removal thing we have going on. I'm really, really focused on trying to cram my deck with how can I spend 1 card to get rid of 3 of my opponent's cards, because they've been printing cycles of these cards. And spoiler alert, at the moment, this could change, my Ur-Dragon deck does have a 3-for-1 spell in it. It actually is playing Pick Your Poison. So I'm really experimenting with these. You know, they're not board wipes, they're not 1-for-1s, they're 3-for-1s. So let's start with Soul Shatter, just because it's surface level, right? Instant speed. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. So essentially how these work is you usually have like one thing you want to get rid of, and then the other 2 are just kind of swept up as like byproducts of it, right? That's why like I'm not playing Anguish Unmaking, because I do like the 3-for-1 mentality. If you really want to play Anguish Unmaking, you can cut one of these. But I'm really, again, I can't stress, I'm leaning into these 3-for-1 spells because they're very premium slots, right? So Flare of Malice is black, and 2. You can sacrifice a non-token black creature rather than pay the cost. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the greatest mana value. So they're essentially the same card. This one could just be cast for free, which is really nice. Now, I know you cannot sacrifice a token, so you can't sacrifice an Edgar token, but if you can recall from previous slides and what we're going to get into next, a lot of our vampires in general, but a lot of our one-drop vampires are just black. So Flare of Malice is like always free. And if you have something like High Society Hunter, you can draw cards off this. And then this is a little bit newer one. This is Unexplained Absence. It's 4 mana, so it's white and 3 for each player. Exile up to 1 non-land permanent that player controls. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller cloaks the top card of their deck. They basically get a 2/2 that they can like kind of flip up. So it's just you get rid of everybody's best thing, and as a byproduct, you choose your worst and you go from there. So I'm really high on this like suite of 3-for-1s. These have been fantastic. And again, it allows you to kind of cut down and trim down. Whereas, you know, if these were all 1-for-1 removal spells, then I might not have room for counter magic, right? I might not have room to have some vampires, but because, you know, these, right, this deals with 3 cards, this deals with 3 cards, this deals with 3 cards, I have the ability to be a little bit more flexible with my removal suite. And then we have some like board wipes, pseudo board wipes here. We have Vandal Blast, which is 1 red, or you could overload it for 1 red and 4. Destroy target or each artifact you don't control. I just think it's good in slot, especially when you're playing in like bracket 4 or higher. Like there's just a lot of artifacts. So it's nice to have kind of a panic button to get rid of all of them. Or just remove one that's giving you a hard time. We have Meat Hut Massacre. This is kind of like half a board wipe for me. So it's black, black, and X. Each creature gets -X/-X. And then whenever a creature dies, each opponent loses a life. And whenever and a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain a life. So basically it has that gain and drain ability. You put enough mana into it, it could wipe the board. There is like a drain sub-theme with a lot of the vampires in here. You couple that with it can be a board wipe, or you could just play like black, black, and it's kind of like Blood Artist Emblem. Pretty good, pretty good. I like Meat Hook in here. It fills a couple different categories. And then we have just kind of the end-all be-all one-sided board wipe. Olivia's Wrath, black and 4. Each non-vampire creature gets -X/-X, where X is the number of vampires. So as long as we have some vampires on the board, one-sided board wipe. So this is the removal package. Again, very, very streamlined. We have some multi 3-for-1 removal, some single target removal on counter magic, target removal on vampires, and some board wipes. All right, as all of my deck techs have, we have the obligatory just good stuff, right? So these don't necessarily fill like a specific role or pillar of the deck, but they're just good cards a lot of the times, and especially in this case, filled with tutors, right? So let's kind of just get into the good stuff card choices. So let's get into the easy ones first. Well, they're all pretty easy. They're all very powerful cards. Again, this is a bracket 4 deck, so we have a ton of tutors. So we're going to start with Imperial Seal, 1 black. Take any card from your library, put it on top of your library. You lose 2 life. We have Vampiric Tutor, which is just the instant speed version of that. We have Demonic Tutor, which is 1 black and 1. Take any card from your library, put it in your hand. Diabolic Intent, which is the same card, but you have to sacrifice a creature. The fact that we're making a bunch of free 1/1s, it's basically Demonic Tutor. Enlightened Tutor is 1 white. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment card, reveal it, put it on top of your deck. So this is going to get a lot of our power cards. Our Skull Clamp, 1 ring. Beseech the Mirror. This is black, black, black 1 with Bargain, so you can sacrifice an artifact, enchantment, or token. Search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. If the spell was Bargain and it cost 4 or less, you can cast it, right? So we're going to be able to bargain it because we're just making a ton of black tokens, right? Black 1/1 tokens. And it's basically free to bargain it. This can get you your 1 ring, which is really nice. And if you see 1 ring every game, you'll probably win. So yeah, that card's insane. Again, we're playing 6 tutors. These are like the best tutors you can play. And especially being able to play like this and not having a cost, essentially. Very strong. We are a creature-based deck, and we are susceptible to board wipes. So we are playing the Teferi's Protection. This just protects us. This protects our board, and it's kind of the end-all, be-all. Again, we do have 2 counter spells in the removal suite, but this is kind of a nice catch-all. And then I'm playing the Akroma's Will. This is a card that has just been kind of making its way into a lot of my decks as well. But essentially, you choose one of the modes. If you have your commander out, you choose 2. So essentially, creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike, and or lifelink indestructible protection from each color, right? So obviously, if you have Edgar, you get them all. If not, you don't really need both modes. You just need one of the modes to just kind of close out the game a lot of the time. If you do get both modes, it's kind of like gravy. But yeah, this is our finisher. This is one of our finishers in the deck. This is our game ender. Unfortunately, due to the foiling process, this boy is a little warped, but yeah, again, it's one of our game enders. Now, this is one of the will cards, so it's one of those modal cards where if you have your commander, you can cast both sides. There is a world of this deck where I play more cards like this, where like I cut something for Jessica's Will, I can cut 2 of the removal spells for like Deflecting Swat and Deadly Rollick, and really lean into the free commander spell and the modal commander spell thing. Again, there is a world where I see that happening. It just really all depends on how often I cast Edgar. And the times I've been playing Edgar, I haven't really been paying attention to that as much as I should. I've been really paying attention to like how the deck functions. Am I hitting my land drops? Am I doing the plays that I want? So again, keep an eye out on the deck list in the description for the most recent updates. But I felt like whether you played one or both modes of this card, it was nuts. And again, the same argument can be made for Jessica's Will. Again, that's another card I'm looking to slot in here, but we'll see. We'll see. Again, there's a world where I play like all the commander spells, and there's a world where I play just slot Jessica's Will in here. But yeah, that's the good stuff. All right, so diving into like the meat of the deck, and the reason why we're all here is the vampires. Now, again, I alluded to in the beginning, we really focused on the low mana value vampires, really leaning into the 1 and the 2 drop vampires to abuse Edgar and keep that curve low. I will preface, just like the Ur Dragon, there's a lot of vampires in the game. There's a lot of good vampires in the game. There's a lot of really good vampires that I am not playing for one reason or the other. I will say, do you play whatever vampires you like. If you like playing the low-cost vampires, the 1 mana value vampires, your choices are thin, right? You don't have the best card quality as long as they're just a 1-drop vampire. But if you're somebody who likes to play a lot of the 4, 5, 6, 7 mana vampires, go for it. That's just not the strategy that I went with, and I really wanted to go with the low mana value hard-nosed build. But again, play whatever vampires you would like. I opted for, I believe it's 16 1-drops across the board between what you see here in the previous slides. But these are just the remaining vampires. So these vampires do not fill a specific pillar or category of the deck, but they are just overall part of the creature type we're going for. So for 1-drops, we're going to go through these pretty quick because they're just the best 1-drops in slot. Again, some of their effects are relevant, some not. Viscera Seer, it's a 1/1 for 1, sack a creature, scry 1. This is really good if you want to protect your board from being exiled. You want to trigger one of your die triggers from, like a Blood Artist or a Blood Witch or something. Indulgent Aristocrat is a 1/1 for 1 with lifelink, and you can pay 2 to sacrifice a creature, put a 1/1 counter on each vampire you control. So this is one of the vampires that do matter, right? You can make your vampires big late game. Falconwrath Gorger is a 2/1. Each vampire creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. That never comes up. It's just a 2/1, so this could trade with some 2/2s if need be. Gul'Draz's Assassin, it's a 1/1 for 1 with level up. Again, you could just pour some mana into it to make it larger, so it's not just a 1/1 dummy all game. Pulse Tracker, it's a 1/1 for 1. Whenever it attacks, each opponent loses a life. So again, it's a 1/1 for 1. It's kind of a decent one in slot. And again, we do have a Drain sub-theme here, so it does kind of fit perfect. Vampire of the Dire Moon, 1/1 for 1, Death Touch lifelink. Vicious Conquistador, 1/1 for 1. Whenever it attacks, each opponent loses a life. Stromkirk Noble, 1/1 for 1. Can't be blocked by humans. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it gets a 1/1 counter. So eventually, if it just gets in there, it'll get large. Knight of the Ebon Legion is a 1/2 for 1. And it has some text where you can pour some mana into it. So again, it's not a complete vanilla. Voldaren Epicure, 1/1 for 1. And whenever it enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And you create a blood token. Pretty good value. Which does bring me to a point. We don't do a lot of blood token stuff in this deck, so you haven't really seen it, and you won't. That's just because, again, I think blood tokens are fine. I think, leaning into different parts of the strategy are better. Now, I will say, if you want to take this deck in a completely different direction, you like the blood token strategy, maybe you like playing the 4, 5, 6, 7 mana vampires, there is a world where you can, I recommend probably playing a different commander like Streffen or something, but there is a world where you can make a really good vampire deck based on blood tokens and larger vampires. I just don't think Edgar is the commander for that. And then Vampire Cutthroat, 1/1 for 1 with Skulk and Lifelink. So, I apologize for the glare. I didn't see that, and I put a lot more cards on the table than I thought I would. So, those are just the remainder of our 1/1 vampires. Going into some 2-mana vampires, again, 1 is almost as good as 2 here, so we're going to go with Tithe Drinker. This is 2/1 for 2 with Lifelink and Extort, so it allows us to kind of lean into some of that drain strategy and pour some extra mana into it. Cruel Celebrant, 1 black and 1. Whenever a Cruel Celebrant or another creature dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Blood Artist, 1 black and 1. Whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Vengeful Blood Witch, 1 black and 1. Whenever this creature or another creature dies, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. These are all like the same thing. They all gain and drain. These trigger off creatures dying, which is really nice. So you kind of force some things that way. And then Cordial Vampire, probably the best 2-drop in the deck. Whenever Cordial Vampire or another creature dies, you put a 1/1 counter on each vampire creature you control. Now, again, I shied away from some of the lords, but I did supplement some 1/1 counter stuff in here, so you'll see some of that if you haven't already. Markov Baron, hopefully you can see that. It's 1 black and 2 for Convoke, so it could come out for less than 3 or even free if you had enough vampires. Lifelink, Madness, and other vampires get +1/+1. Again, we do want some lords in the deck. We just don't want a ton. We don't want to turn off our Skull Clamp, right? And then we have Drana, Liberator of Malakir. Some people opt to play this. Again, this is one of those min-max slots that I have to test out. There might be just better cards to play, but I do not want to just completely abandon the pump strategy. There is a difference between 5/1/1s and 5/3/3s, right? That actually does matter at some point. So I don't want to shy away from that completely. So Drana is black, black, and 1. Whenever it deals combat damage, put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control. It has flying and first strike. So if you attack with Drana and 4 1/1s, Drana's first strike goes off first and turns those 1/1s into 2/2s, which is really nice. Going into the vampires, let's talk about this cheeky little combo, this cheeky package here. So, if you've played Magic for a while, back in the day, Exquisite Blood, Sanguine Bond combo was kind of a thing. With more modern Commander, especially at bracket 4 tables, it's kind of janky, right? It's 10 or 11 mana, and then you need another card to trigger it. So it doesn't quite, it kind of fits the strategy, but they're both enchantments and it costs 10 or 11 mana. Now you can play said combo for 8 mana and they're both on vampires. And I cannot stress how much that actually matters, that not only does it cost less mana to play that combo in the form of creatures, they are creatures, they are vampires, they fulfill your strategy, they help your game plan. Sometimes, if you have Bloodthirsty Conqueror, casting Veto, making the 1/1, and then being able to sacrifice that 1/1 for whatever reason with a Blood Artist, that kind of interaction, it goes a long way and it does matter, on top of it costing less. So we're not playing Exquisite Blood, we're not playing Sanguine Bond. but the creature version combo works all the better for us. And then like standalone cards, again, they are creatures. This is a flying Death Toucher, right? This allows your creatures to all get lifelink. So they do have added value and utility as well. And then kind of going into some of the other bigger vampires, these just kind of do various things. So we're going to start Bloodline Keeper. It's black, black, and 2. This really cool, awesome secret lair version. You could tap it to create a 2/2 vampire with flying, and then you could pay 1 to transform it if you have 5 or more vampires, and it transforms into Lord of Lineage with this gorgeous, gorgeous secret lair artwork where other vampires get +2/+2, and you could tap it to create a 2/2, which is essentially a 4/4. So it just allows us to create more board presence, and I think it's one of the better 4-mana vampires just due to like how much text is on the card. This is one of my favorite cards, man. And in tandem, it works well with the next card, but this is Sanctum Seeker. Black, black, and 2. Whenever a vampire you control attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So if you attack with 5 vampires, each opponent loses 5 and you gain that much life lost, right? So it creates for big life swings, but you also do not have to connect with the vampires to start draining the table, which I really like. You can throw some dead 1/1s out there. You can throw some dead 2/2s out there. If they get through, great. If not, they're going to take the damage. And it works. And the drain strategy and cards like Sanctum Seeker work really, really well with Bloodletter of Aclazotz, which is black, 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 1, flying. If an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life. Again, going into like min-maxing, this is kind of a card that I've played with. It could come out, but I think like doubling up on Sanctum Seeker, doubling up on like Blood Artist triggers, Vengeful Blood Witch triggers, things like that, I do think they have a lot of value. And then cards like Blood Artist, triggering with Bloodletter, like it just amplifies and expedites the time it takes to win. Elenda of the Dusk Rose, black, white, and 2, lifelinker. Whenever another creature dies, you put a 1/1 counter on Elenda, and whenever Elenda dies, you create X 1/1 white vampire creature tokens with lifelink, where X is the power. So I kind of use Elenda as like board wipe insurance, and that actually goes kind of hand in hand with like Blood Witch and Blood Artist. So you don't want to get sent back to the Stone Age with a board wipe, and if you do, you want to have a counter spell up. Maybe you want to have like a Blood Artist or Vengeful Blood Witch up to kind of like make them pay for dealing with your board. But if you have Elenda and Elenda has like 10 counters on it and they wipe your board, you'll get 10 1/1s back. So your board isn't completely dealt with. You'll still have some advantage there. So she's more board wipe insurance combined with like the Blood Artist and stuff. Drana Linvala, black, white, white, 1, flying vigilance. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. Drana and Linvala have all activated abilities of creatures your opponent controls. You may spend mana of those mana of any color. It's just a good vampire. Like it's got, again, I go back to, it has a lot of text. It does a lot of different things. It slows down your opponent and allows you to steal some of their abilities. So I figured for 4 mana, it's very, very good in slot. And then we have Honorary Vampire, Roaming Throne. It is 4 colorless with Ward 2. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Roaming Throne is the creature type, and triggered abilities of another creature you control with the same creature type triggers an additional time. That is a mouthful. Basically, all your vampire stuff triggers twice. Your Blood Witches, your Blood Artist, your Sanctum Seeker, you know, your millions of other vampires in the deck. All that stuff triggers twice. The next card we're going to talk about, Malakir Blood Witch, all that stuff just goes off an additional time, and it expedites your win. And then, again, Malakir Blood Witch is black, black, and 3, flying pro right. When Malakir Blood Witch enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control, and you gain the amount of life that way. So, for example, if you have 5 vampires, you cast Blood Witch, you drain each opponent for 6, and you gain 18, which is really nice. So, combo that with like Roaming Throne and Bloodletter. You can see how that would kind of get out of hand. And again, kind of funnels into the drain strategy of the deck. But those were the vampires I chose. Again, heavy 1/1s, right? We have about 16 overall. We have our little combo here. And then these are just the ones I thought were the best to kind of fill out the deck, that were good not only on their own but with other cards as well. All right, so to round out the deck, we're going to go to my favorite part and yours, the land base. I will say the land base is also very, very streamlined. We are playing a very, very small land package on the grand landscape of things. We are playing 33 lands, which means every land needs to count and do something very, very impactful. Not only that, we want the majority of our lands to be able to make the colors we need, right? So primarily black, but we also want to get our, secondary colors online as well. So if you look at it, like as opposed to a lot of the 3-color decks that maybe I haven't brewed a lot of 3-color decks for the channel in particular, but I have brewed them in my personal time, and they've all included green. So getting your colors in green and fixing your mana is very, very easy. When I did the first version of this deck, the first draft, and I played it with my play group, I noticed it was like really hard sometimes to get the colors I needed online and to especially get black pips. So leaning into like rainbow lands in a non-green land base has been like super beneficial, and it's kind of eye-opening when deck building. So just a little bit of advice from me to you if you haven't had that experience. Like in non-green decks, rainbow lands are like super valuable, because like I don't usually play like in 3-color decks. Like I don't usually play like the Mana Confluence and the City of Brass. I don't feel like they're warranted. Like they're more for like 4 or 5-color decks. But when you don't have green, like it's much harder to fix your land base and your colors. So let's kind of get into it here, right? So let's get into rainbow lands. These are a little disorganized. So let's get Mana Confluence and City of Brass. I kind of already talked about these. These are going to give you access to all 3 of your colors for a very, very small price. You're not in green. They matter. Cavern of Souls allows you to add mana of any color for a vampire. They are not counterable, and then it can tap for a colorless, so very good rainbow land. This card, oh, I could talk about this card all day. 3 Tree City, man. This card is an overperformer. I don't know if it's just because like I'm a kindred creature type guy, or because this card's like actually pretty good, but this card has put in a lot of work, especially in this deck. When it enters, you choose a creature type. It taps to add a colorless, so it could fund some of our other spells. But you could tap this into to choose a color and add mana of the chosen color equal to the number of the chosen creature type. So if I tap this if I tap 3 and I have 6 vampires, I get 6 mana, so I get 3 additional mana out of this guy. At the rate that you do play some small vampires, this card gets out of hand. I love this card. Again, it helps fix your mana pool, but kind of in the grand scheme of things, like it is like a ramp spell, right? We have Command Tower. Savoy Triome, it's just the Mardu Triome of the deck. Castle Dracula, which is interesting. This is tap for the colorless, pay 1 life to add a mana of any color. Use this only to cast a vampire, and then you can sink some mana into it to add a blood token. Horizon of Progress, this is a newer card over the last couple sets. I think I'm playing this in my Dragon deck over like Reflecting Pool right now, but don't quote me on that. But you could pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color that any land you control can produce. So again, if we have our colors online, it's a rainbow land. And then if you have some extra mana lying around, you could put a land into play, or you can sack it, cash it in to draw a card. Really, really nice. Really good, like overall, like rainbow land that has some utility to it. Getting into some like very, very simple things. Obviously, we have our shock lands, our Bloodstained Mire, our Marsh Flats, and our Arid Mesa. We do have our shock lands. We have our Sacred Foundry, our Godless Shrine, and our Blood Crypt. You will notice that there's no original dual lands in here. I just didn't feel a need to play them. Like, again, if you want to min-max the deck, you could play the original duels, whether you have them or proxy them. If you watched a couple videos ago, you know I have my set of duels now. I just haven't put them in here. I just don't think it's needed. But if you wanted to min-max, you could play your original duels. We have our crowd lands. These enter tapped if you have 2 or more opponents. Our Luxury Suite, our Vault of Champions, and our Spectator Seating. And then I just wanted to touch base on these really quick. I am playing 1 of each basic for two reasons. One, because I have these really awesome foil Dracula lands. These look awesome and they fit the theme of the deck, which is really cool. The other reason is I needed some additional fetch targets that came in untapped, and I suppose you could play the original duels over these, but I figured I wanted some additional fetch targets, and those look really cool. They go with the theme, so I wanted to play those. Going into some other like secondary color fixers, we have Silent Clearing. It is basically pay 1 life to add a black or white, and you can cash it in for a card. Caves of Koilos, which is like the pain land. Same thing, you just can't cash it in for a card. The reason I'm playing those two is because white is kind of our second more popular color, so I wanted to make sure if I get to black, I can also get to white. And then we have Mount Doom. You could pay a life to add black or red. You could also pay black, red, and 1 to tap it and deal 1 damage to each opponent. Or what we can do, if we have the 1 ring on the board and we want to reset everything, we can sack Mount Doom and the 1 ring and destroy everything but 2 other creatures, which is really cool. It's just kind of in there. More as like a color fixer because, you know, you could always use the black and red color fixer, but it just has extra text on it. Going into some single color lands of the deck, let's talk about these two. So we have Iganjo, which is an untapped plane. You could also channel it to deal 4 damage to an attacking or blocking creature. It's just a modal land. It's a plains when we need a plains, and it's a pseudo removal spell when we need a removal spell. Minas Tirith. This is enters taps unless you control a legendary creature. We don't have a ton of legendaries in the deck. Even with like obviously like Edgar in the command zone. So this does come in a tap more often than not. It's fine. It does add a white, and then you could cash basically when you attack with 2 or more creatures, you could tap 2 and draw a card. So it's just kind of like a card draw spell in the land. Again, we're trying to min-max our mana base here, so if we can get bonus text on a land, we will take it. Some black utility lands here. We have Dracula's Tomb, also known as Phyrexian Tower. Tap to add a colorless, and then you could tap it, sack a creature to add black. Nice little ram spell on a land. It's also Dracula's Tomb, so it fits theme. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. It just ensures we're fixed for black for the rest of the game. Fel the Profane is on the back side. Is basically an untapped swamp for 3 life. And on the other side, it's an overcosted removal spell. The fact that it's modal, it comes in untapped for a small life total when we need it, and it's a removal spell if we need that. So very good modal capability there. And then the same thing here, Agadeem's Awakening. On one side, it's an untapped swamp for 3 life. On the other side, we could pour some mana to revive a lot of creatures. And then our actual utility lands, these usually tap for colorless mana, but they are in here because they provide additional value. We have Urza Saga. This is going to search our Soul Ring, our Springleaf Drum, or our Skull Clamp, and it just kind of gets us there. It kind of sets the pace of the game. Ancient Tomb deals 2 damage to us, but also adds 2 colorless. Awesome for our acceleration. Some more removal. I did have an extra slot for land in this deck, and I didn't really have a ton of land destruction. I think Unexplained Absence allows me to hit lands, which is really, really nice, but I just wanted out to like Gaia's Cradle, couple coffers, and I had the extra land spot. And then the last utility land of the deck is this really cool card. It's a little bit newer. It's called Fountain Sport. Taps for a colorless, but you could also tap 2 and tap it to sack a token and draw a card. So you kind of cash them in some extra mana and a token to draw. You can create tokens with it, and then you can create treasure tokens. So overall, just a cool little utility card, but that was the land package I went with. We have our rainbow color fixers, some single color utilities, obviously all of our dual color lands, and some ancillary utilities there. And that rounds out the mana base, folks. All right, folks, and that's going to round out my Edgar Markov deck tech for this evening. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a deck that I've put a lot of time and effort and money into. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the showcase of it and the guide. Let me know what you guys think. Did you guys like some of the card choices? Did you dislike some of the card choices? Is there anything I'm missing? Is there anything you agree or disagree with? Or anything you can help me do to min-max my strategy a little bit? Any feedback is appreciated. Again, this deck is only a few months in the making, so there are some tweaks that I'll make along the way, so be sure to check out the description for the Moxfield link to keep up to date with all the newest changes for the deck. Be sure to use the TCG Player affiliate link. Bookmark it if you want to support the channel. Head on over to duelingguard.com and use my code Draken if you want your awesome Beast Gohan deck box. And with that said, thank you guys. Keep an eye out for my Tarkir Dragonstorm set review. I am going to break down some of the best cards in the set for your Dragon deck and give you my honest opinion and where they would slot in. And then after that is going to be me brewing and testing and giving you guys an updated, long-awaited Dragon deck with some of the new cards from Dragonstorm. Thank you all for your support. I appreciate it, and I'm out.